Hannah, I'm so excited to have you on Gut Honest Truth today and bring awareness of both your business, your lab company, and all you guys have to offer to my listeners.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Katie. It's great to meet you and great to be connected and chat.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about TruDiagnostics and sort of a mixture of what you guys obviously offer, but the technology a little bit behind it too, because this is really all about epigenetics and longevity, right? For people, which is all the rage right now. It's hot topic. And but I do think it's as a consumer very misunderstood. I don't think we're doing as good of a job as practitioners as we could to really like explaining what that means for them and what they can do to be able to like improve and reverse different things like biological age.
Yeah, that's great, and agree with you on all fronts there. This is a very confusing subject, so hopefully we'll untangle some of those webs as it relates to anyone listening who's maybe seen a consumer-focused test or has any questions on what's the difference or what's really important, what should we be looking at, right? So my company is TruDiagnostic. We specialize in epigenetic DNA methylation outcomes, and we're really betting on epigenetics as the biomarker of the future, you could say. So a lot of people understand, and I would say first hear about us through those age-related outcomes and biological aging. So we'll maybe start there, just because it's a place we can all be a little familiar with. But biological aging and just aging itself is so multifactorial. It's really difficult. It's confusing, right? But there's all different ways we can measure kind of that biological aging. Way back when they actually used to measure it by how many cigarettes you smoked, which is, yeah, a really crude measurement, right? But it's just this idea that you're kind of aging at the cellular level because, I'm 26 years old chronologically. I know people who look way older than me, and I know people who look way younger than me. So we know chronological age isn't really a great measurement of what's going on inside the body. Thus, there's this need for this measurement of biological age. So through a lot of extensive work and research, particularly by Dr. Steve Horvath, if anyone's familiar with that name from UCLA, he pioneered this subject. We started really noticing that these DNA methylation or these epigenetic markers, essentially the expression levels of our genes, is the best way to measure that aging process. So it's been the most correlated. I would say causative. No one knows quite yet. I think that's a bigger question to ask. But yeah, it's really fascinating, and we're finding more and more about what these markers mean to our own health every day.
That's really interesting. So how does it work? How does the lab actually work? Like how's if I were to run the test on myself? I'm interested in that.
Yeah, yeah. So you actually would just, receive a kit. You can purchase one online if you wanted to. You would get a little kit shipped. I'll show you. I have one I'm staring at right now. You'd get a little kit shipped to you. So it just looks like this. You would follow the instructions inside of it and register the kit online. And then it's just a finger prick. So just a blood spot card. So it's, yeah, not that big of a sample, right? Obviously, if you're using anything with blood, it is going to be considered invasive, but really it's only what I would say is like 10 to 15 drops of blood. You kind of slip it in the biohazard bag. It only has a barcode on it. So it's, de-identified information, and then you ship it back to our lab. So I think one of the really unique things about my company is we own our own lab. So we're located in Lexington, Kentucky, right? We're not outsourcing to any other third parties. Everything is, run under our roof. We're able to kind of give you, time point for each part of the process.
Very cool. And so what if somebody's listening and they're like, why would I have this tested, right? Why would I want to know my biological age versus my actual like chronological age? What would be either some conditions, some symptoms, besides obviously just maybe curious minds there that would
Yeah.
someone that maybe they should start to look into this and what's actually going on the cellular level.
Yeah, that's a great question. So again, first and foremost, coming back to this idea of aging, right? For anyone who's even has a disease diagnosis right now, aging is still the number one risk factor for every single chronic disease and death. So regardless, I believe everyone should measure the biological aging process. I would say what we have found though in the 3.5 years that we've been open, and out of the 35,000 people we've tested, it's usually going to be those people who are already relatively healthy who are taking our test, right?
Yeah, optimization.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
exactly. They're looking to optimize where they're kind of like, okay, I'm with my functional or integrative doctor. My hormones look great. My labs are looking really good. Hey, what's next, doc? And, enter then the biological aging process.
And so, what do the docs tend to recommend? I remember back where I used to work many years ago, a couple of people were doing tests like this on themselves and talking about obviously like what their age was showing versus what it was, and you could either see the displeasure on their on their the results or not. But so, what are some of the common recommendations you guys are making, or having the docs that you work with making when somebody, let's say, is aging like 10 years faster than their chronological age?
Yeah, I would say, so we don't make any recommendations on the reports. I want to make that, yeah, really clear as well. Just because number one, it's so new, it would be really frustrating to make a recommendation and then maybe something changes saying, we don't know, or, we don't have enough information on this. So that's why we mainly work with healthcare providers in that integrative functional medicine space, just because they're going to be able to get a more comprehensive picture on you and maybe make better, more strategic recommendations. It doesn't mean, we don't know what works, right? I spend most of my day, I probably speak with like, it's honestly crazy, like 35 to 50 new healthcare providers every week, teaching them about this test and what works and how to interpret it and, what's best for their patients. So we are speaking with the healthcare providers. All sorts of stuff though, Katie, lifestyle, which is rather intuitive, but I think absolutely crucial. Supplements, medications, procedural based therapies that get a little bit more exciting as well.
Yeah. So are there commonalities that practitioners you see like in the research with on a cellular level? Obviously I do this with my clients, but that are working sort of broad recommendations for lifestyle and nutrition, like avoiding certain, like, is it processed foods take a real big hit on the cell? Is it
Yeah.
obviously like getting high antioxidants, polyphenols? Is that where we see like a significant change in the biological test?
Yeah, definitely. I've done probably thousands of these report reviews now, looking at the trends and the associations. So it's really unique that I'm able to kind of draw these conclusions. And again, no one wants to. Everyone wants the easy way out, right? They want a pill that can cure all, right? They want the GLP-1, right? But I would say you have to put in the work from a lifestyle recommendation standpoint, just in terms of, yes, more exercise, right? Better eating. So there's been studies according to the research with caloric restriction, Mediterranean based diet, things like the DASH diet, dietary approaches to stop hypertension, which is kind of what you just said, right? Less processed foods, less sugar sweet beverages, less sodium, more whole foods, legumes, grains, more veggies, more fruits. We're currently doing a study with Dr. Joel Furman right now on the nutritarian diet, which is the G bombs, which is greens, beans, onions, mushrooms. I think it's berries and then seeds, right? And that one is hypothesized to be even better than that DASH diet I mentioned there.
Yeah, I could foresee that. And are there certain, movement patterns or exercises that are showing in the research to be either detrimental to, to cell health when, I'm talking obviously in excess versus like day to day, but like if you're
Yeah.
training and different things like that, are you guys finding anything when you're doing some research on that?
Yeah, for sure. So it's interesting. One of our older biological age outcomes that we call it intrinsic, which is just to define it, a first generation clock, meaning it's supposed to get closer and closer to your chronological age. So, we want to take this with a grain of salt, but people who actually overtrained, we saw their intrinsic epigenetic age actually being, I would say, rather increased. I would say to a significant amount. So there's kind of that fine line, I think, where you definitely don't want to overexert yourself or overexercise. But I don't believe in necessarily like true rest days, right? Where you don't do anything. I still think you need to try and get, 2,000 steps, right? Or stretch, right? Or do breathing or mindfulness and meditation.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I'm
And we,
saying move your body
yeah.
with ways that like move with the body versus resisting to go against the body. So, definitely work with your practitioners if there's a possibility of of overdoing and overtraining, because I do see that quite often in my practice is really kind
Yeah.
of the under eating, overdoing piece of the puzzle.
Yeah. I like that. I like that a lot. Yeah. Because, as a general recommendation, it's really hard to do kind of the exercise studies with the epigenetics, but yeah, it's mixing up what you're doing, right? Aerobic, anaerobic.
Yeah.
walking is still considered a movement of the body, right? It doesn't have to be going to the gym and throwing around really big, heavy weights. It could be, yeah, just taking a walk with your friends, or, something a little bit having to do with more of the mind exercising.
Yeah. And so what
Mhm.
do you or would you suggest if a practitioner says like a significant change or being off on biological age? Like, is it 2 years, 5 years, 10 years?
Yeah, so what we would do is put you in a percentile, essentially. So this new biological age, what we call our new omic M age, we created with Harvard. It's flawed thinking to think, oh, my biological age is 2 years older, that's bad, or it's 2 years younger, that's really good, right? Because to like quote unquote normalize it, we need to compare it to something to see if it's above or below that threshold. So, um, yeah, we'll put you in a percentile, and obviously the lower percentile, the better, meaning you have a better biological age compared to people of your same chronological age group and your same biological sex. So, even in the way we kind of created this more of the statistical route, chronological age being equal to your biological age doesn't necessarily even mean you're in the 50th percentile, right? So it kind of depends on the population.
Kind of interesting to think about with just how sort of generally unhealthy America and Americans are right now. Like how those percentiles even work, you know what I mean? Even work like comparing, are you being, is a somebody who's moving a lot and following a Mediterranean diet and trying to practice stress reduction and like decrease toxic burden, we're automatically lumped in with people who are maybe smoking and not moving and all of that too. So it's just really interesting to think about.
Yeah. So the percentile we compare you to, hopefully this will clear it up too, is a true diagnostic cohort. So it's really, really healthy people, right? So you're being kind of compared against the best of the best, which, my the way I think in my personality, I'm like, hey, if I'm doing it, I want to do it, right? I want to be compared against those people. So you may not score as well as you thought you might have, because it's definitely not a general population.
That's actually just really good to know because obviously in the functional space, we always are trying to like, not trying to, but talk to our patients about things like, I don't know, one example that just came to mind was like the average of like a TSH for thyroid marker and being like, this is what is a lump sum of, people. That doesn't mean just because you fall in that normal, that's at all healthy or using a healthy population to compare yourself to. So it's good to know
Right.
comparing it to kind of a fairly different, different subset of people and sort of more like the goal than
Hmm.
generality.
Yeah.
So.
Exactly. Kind of what's that optimal kind of range, rather than just, the standardized almost range.
Yeah, and that's interesting. I'm wondering how many people with that too, kind of like you said, still there's still that group of people in the functional space, right? Obviously a lot, I'm generalizing here, but like a lot of patients and consumers, they really like they'll come and I'm like, you eat better than me. You do all these things, like you are driven to do the things and put in the work, but still a lot want the pill, even if it's a natural pill, right? So I'd be interested to see with the docs already, regularly using your test, how many are making more the lifestyle shifts, or is it coming down to
Yeah.
getting more product? Or maybe I could see it being a better test of like, should we really actually be diving deeper into things like toxic burden and mold and all of that? And is that actually
Yeah.
the health, your longevity and your age versus your lifestyle? Like you're doing everything right.
Yeah. There's kind of two practitioners, I would say, that we mainly serve. It's like the ones that are like treating aging as a disease, longevity docs, like
Yeah.
we're doing all the testing, whether you think you need it or not. Um, they're usually the ones who are located in Miami, Florida, New York City, LA, San Fran. So what they're doing is they're charging you, I've seen, a couple $100,000 a year to be the client. Um, However, I really respect, which not everyone can do this because they don't have the same clientele. A lot of those doctors will say, I am not taking you as a patient if you're not doing the lifestyle things correct, because you're a waste of my time, right? I'm not, like, they don't fundamentally believe in, just medicating to medicate, right? They actually want to treat kind of the root, the functional, and do more of a holistic picture. So I have so much respect for those doctors. But obviously not everyone can do that because not everyone's willing to pay that price. And then secondarily, the other type of docs are, they do longevity to an extent, but it's usually maybe they do hormones on the side, right? And they are trying to do more lifestyle, but if they don't do the lifestyle things correct, then that's okay, and they will try to focus on more supplement medication. But I don't think either way is right. They're both just unique options.
Yeah, you kind of run into that in your practice. I think either way too. I always see it and it's hard. It's a lot of work and behavior shifts to do, the foundational piece, which is probably the most impactful on all of the
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
sorry. So how often do you guys recommend people test and retest? Like obviously test, you just do the test. But if I were to do it and I was like, I'm not happy with this, I am not happy with my
Yeah.
style. How if I was willing to put in the effort, the lifestyle, all of that, like how often should I consider redoing the test?
Yeah, usually we kind of have two products. The larger one called the Complete Kit. People want to do that probably every 6 months or so, or even every 12 months if you kind of want to extend it out, right? You want to give your chance, or excuse me, you want to give yourself the chance to actually make that change, like you were saying, right? You don't want to test too soon, but we say at least 6 months. So most are doing it like every year, but they'll actually retest with our cheaper price in our smaller kit called the True Age Pace, which just does the Dunedin pace of aging and kind of the telomere length. So it doesn't give you an overarching biological age. It kind of just tells you like a pace, like almost like a speedometer, like, hey, are you doing things that are speeding up your aging, or are things actually starting to slow down a little bit, right? That one is so precise, people can actually do it every 2 to 3 months if they wanted to. So I see people doing it in that kind of model where, again, it's like, if you're coming into this from like a healthcare provider stance, and if you're listening and you're a healthcare provider, a lot of people are doing like membership models or programs or packages.
That's interesting. I mean, for people who are really determined, like that, the cheaper of the two prices, like and having that quick turnaround is good feedback that like, almost just like any lab saying it's working or it's not, like we need to modify. So that actually is really quite helpful. Do you mind me asking the price of the two if people are interested in ever doing that?
Yeah, yeah, online, just like a consumer, it's 4.99 for the complete, and then 2.29 for the True Age Pace. But yeah, usually, some 20% discount code you can get or something like that to get it a little bit cheaper. But yeah, you're limited a little more on the reports that we give you from a consumer side. And then again, no consultation or recommendation. So we don't do any outside marketing to consumers. Usually we try to push them to go with a healthcare provider if at all possible.
And it could be a good starting place if they do start as like lab to consumer and they find they're not happy with what the outcome is, like that could
Yeah.
be your ticket to be like, I should work with a functional or integrative type of practitioner to really see what might be going on a deeper level. Right.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, where we could just merge, those results over to the provider. They could do a workup on them, and then yeah, have them test later too. It's funny because I actually thought of this earlier today. Usually, people who test are like, oh wow, they're kind of surprised by their results, and they're like, even if they're not doing that great, they're still surprised because they're like, whoa, I wish I would have tested like 5 to 10 years before I even saw my functional doctor, because then I would be like more proud of the
I know.
work I've put in, right? Which
Yeah.
makes sense.
That's so interesting. This is just a selfish question. Have you found I imagine so. This is me just intuitively thinking things. How much does like uh well, we can just wrap it up and say motherhood as a whole, but like pregnancy, motherhood, how much does that impact this? Like how much does
Yeah. So
how
this is
age am I?
there's a paper that came out by Dr. Jesse Poganik out of Harvard. He's under Dr. Vadim Gladishev's lab, which is one of the leading labs for aging, and they do a lot of epigenetic aging as well. So he actually tests kind of really, really massive stressors on the body. I think the paper is called Stresses something something, and then stress is restored upon recovery. So that kind of gives away the ending. But basically, he looked at pregnancy, severe COVID-19, and then surgeries, both elected and unelected. So what you see on those events is biological age is skyrocketing. It's really increasing. Yeah, my nervous sweat.
Well, at least I feel like it's actuals. I can blame my toddler.
Yeah, exactly. However, it is restored upon recovery. So usually we see those increases actually go back down, and even sometimes, even farther than the baseline, depending on if you're doing, other things to benefit that. So, subjectively, a little story here, I will say, this was when we just kind of launched the pace of aging. I had two report reviews that day, both women. The paces of aging. So for scale, it goes from zero point 0.6 to 1.4. These were at both like 1.3 something. I had never seen that result before, Katie. I mean, I was freaking out. I was like, did we make a mistake? What's going on? They both told me they were pregnant when they took the test, which makes sense. But I was like, I have no idea what I'm going to tell these providers. And I was like really nervous to speak with them. But 100% had to do with them being pregnant.
I mean, I can't think of many bigger stressors on a human's
Yeah.
body. and then all of that, and just the even like 2 to 3 years to follow. I feel like that takes time. I do really like that. This is kind of like backtracking on something you said, but
Mhm.
you were sort of alluding to it, but so many people still expect outcomes so quickly in what they do, especially with lifestyle. And we know that lifestyle obviously takes time. You can feel pretty good, within a couple of weeks of changing nutrition and all of that movement, but it takes months to
Yeah.
really like reverse things. So I do really like that you suggested like a minimum 6 to 12 months to really see the true outcome of the change.
Hmm.
And I also think it's important for people. I think there's probably still people have heard you like talking all about this, and they're thinking, okay, age, and thinking very superficially about it, right? Like, how do I look?
Hmm.
How do I totally feel versus what's going down on a cellular level? Um,
Yeah.
I still think that's just such a misconception where people are like, oh, I'm graying, right? Or something, or getting wrinkles. And it's like that doesn't obviously it can present, phenotype that way. But I think it's interesting to think about what is really happening on the base level. It's really where you guys like thrive.
Yeah, I actually had someone answer or ask me what's like the biggest misconception about epigenetics earlier today. I didn't really have one, besides, hey, it's ever changing. Like, just trust the research and like make sure you're educating yourself and you're following up. But you just gave me an answer, which is, yeah, we get a lot of people who say, "Oh, I'm healthy. Like, I don't need to test, right? I look great," or or "Oh my gosh, my score is going to be like 100 years older," right? Which is very, dramatic, but you get the point. And the thing is, you really don't know until you test. Like, what does quote unquote healthy mean? Like, are you actually putting in the work? Because trust me, we've gotten some, customer support emails which is like, hey, I do this. Why does my aging look so bad? And then we can run like a little bit of a further analysis with some other like algorithms and you know, again,
Mhm.
10 times out of 10, it's never failed us. We can see the same trend across every algorithm on the board. So that means there is some aging effect happening, right? Regardless of how you feel or how you look, there's something on the cellular level that's just not working. Whether it's because maybe it is a little bit of a smaller hereditary factor, right? So epigenetics can even pick up like if your great grandmother smoked, like you're going to have signatures on your DNA from that, right? Which is pretty crazy. So there could be like a little bit of a genetic component there too, or something maybe that happened in your childhood, right? Some type of trauma or PTSD that we're not able to identify because we're not getting all of that information. But because epigenetics is so stable enough to pick up everything from your environment, we're able to see that outcome, which again, I think is just mind blowing. It's amazing. So you just gave me an answer to that question.
Welcome. Of service today. That's and so are there what are like, for lack of better phrasing, I guess, what are some risk factors if let's say we just totally ignore it? We don't, I'm like, this is poo poo. I'm going to poo poo this whole thing. And my biological age doesn't matter. Like, what are some risk factors or a few, potential risk factors or conditions or whatever you want to say, because symptoms that might peek its head, in 10, 20 years if we ignore it?
Yeah, I mean, every disease, just period. Yeah, because with again that new omic MH, now we report out on disease because what we did is we took 5,000 samples from Harvard's biobank and we had their DNA when they were really young and we had their DNA when they were, really old and even some when they died. So we actually know, hey, if you have these signatures from your DNA methylation, your epigenetics this early, you're more likely to have this disease later on in life. So again, it comes back to this. I don't even like to say preventative because relates preventative sounds like again you're preventing a disease, right? You're already sick. So I like to say longevity, functional, integrative. If you're testing early, you are saving money in the long run, right? Because if you get type 2 diabetes, COPD, and then you still have to start going through treatments, right? And start getting testing more frequently. Like this testing is saving you money in the long run. Yes, you're going to have to pay for it up front, right? Out of pocket a little bit more and put in the work. But that's why I think, and we can already start to see the trend, the cash pay integrative functional medicine space is just, booming.
Yeah, I was just going to say that just reminds me of any really cash pay functional medicine practitioner. People are like,
Right.
if I can't afford it, I don't want to do the testing. You're like, this is to optimize and kind of prevent or minimize what's going on so that you don't develop all these chronic conditions and then have to both be suffering ailments, you know what I mean, symptoms, but also
Right.
paying a lot through whether it's insurance or not insurance for way more invasive,
Yeah.
healthcare. So I
Yeah.
absolutely I absolutely agree with that. And it's really important. Like we obviously have been alluding to this too, but to just remember like your genetics load the gun, but they don't pull the trigger, right? Like we have so
Mhm.
many things that we can always be doing and supporting or removing, just toxic burden in the household, just simple things that are even just not, they're not expensive, that will minimize
Yeah.
damage you're doing to cells and the aging process. So I think
Yeah.
there's so many different things you could talk about. Where do you see the technology or the things you guys will be able to report hopefully one day like going in the trends of the future?
Yeah. I think you'll like this one, just because you asked kind of about pregnancy and the effects. So are you a mom, you said, correct?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Okay, perfect. So I, again, in this, I don't know how to describe it. I don't want to say weird. I don't want to say odd, maybe interesting, like sector where, again, I speak with healthcare providers all day. So I know that this has an application, it has a use, but I also have like my podcast and I'm talking to researchers and we're doing like all these things. So I'm like, how do we bring that research into application? Because there's so many papers out there that can predict almost anything, but we need a market for it. We need, the development. There's one company in particular that has already done this. They're called Dionysus Health, and Dr. Zachary Kaminsky really kind of leads the research behind this. He's an expert in predicting mental illnesses using epigenetics. So what they're able to do is just with the finger prick blood spot card, is they're actually able to predict postpartum depression in women who are pregnant and even things like preterm birth and a couple other outcomes. So, if you're pregnant or, you just had baby and you want to test and you can see your likelihood of getting PPD, you can actually take steps to decrease that risk. So yeah, that company, I think they don't have a product quite yet, but the website's up and running. So that's where we're going to start to see this field go, is you're going to be able to just purchase like, one indication, kind of a test for one indication or a couple of them. And it can, have to do with any type of disease or any type of outcome.
That's pretty wild. I mean, that could prevent so many problems. And I'm saying problems, that sounds like poor word choice there, but problems with obviously new mothers and just really it's a very under discussed topic of, postpartum
Exactly.
things. And it could make it a little less isolating, I think, for people to have a little more power in what's going on with their body and their life,
Yeah.
because it is
Yeah.
a big toll. It just made me think of it. I was like, there's so many things that obviously play a role, but like, gosh, how big of a stressor is the years, from like conception to breastfeeding to all of it just take on someone's body, and like, how do we get that back? Am I aged forever?
Yeah.
Or how significantly reduce that back to normal? So I'm interested to hear if you have some like takeaways for people that are like practical takeaways or steps they could do outside of obviously like get the test, start there, see what you're even working with, but
Mhm.
that are implementing day to day that's not expensive or not, super cumbersome, that they can work on their epigenetic profile.
Yeah, I think we kind of talked about the main ones, right? A little bit like nutrition. It's very easy. I don't want to say easy, but it's one of those that you can start to make kind of a lifestyle change, a habitual daily change. Sleep, right? Quantity and quality sleep. You can just feel it when you're not well rested, right? So, I mean, your body better than anyone else, right? I do the Whoop. I'm sure, people listening have the Whoop or Aura Ring where you can check and get quantity and quality, movement of the body. We talked about meditation, reducing stress levels, reading, walking, writing. I don't know, whatever does it for you, right? Kind of those four main lifestyle factors and pillars I think are huge. You briefly mentioned detoxification, right? Women in particular put on like almost 200 different chemicals on their body every day, from their makeup to their lotions, hair care, etc. So check your labels. That's really important, kind of understanding and reading what those ingredients and formulations are. I think insulin, working on insulin sensitivity, that ties in kind of, again, diet, fitness, lifestyle. No smoking, no drinking. That's going to save you money in the long run too, right? If you're kind of putting those habits to rest. And I think the last one I'll say or have off the top of my head, I know we don't like BMI as just like a traditional biomarker anymore, but that's what we have the data on, so we can use it. So people who have a higher BMI actually tend to have more accelerated epigenetic aging. So we want to make sure that we're, trying to keep that BMI a little bit lower as well.
Just a healthier balance of weight. I like my specific questions today. Are there specific alcohols that are more detrimental on the cell potentially?
I would
I
say
think no
we
one
don't.
let's research this, but I'm
Yeah, I would say we don't have the hard research like if you choose this, a Miller over a Bud, you whatever. But no, I would say kind of health wise, right? Clear liquor is probably going to be
I
better than more of like,
regulation too of just like beer and wine versus, tequila.
yeah. I'd say yeah, from a health perspective, if you had to choose, probably yeah, clear liquid. Not mixing
Not
with
the
any
first
like
time someone's
sugary
asked
drinks. you know, what else is there? And again, people say, well, why do people in the blue zones live so long? And they're drinking all this wine and whatnot. Um, they have a very different lifestyle from us. Most people in America are working 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. and then they're going home and they're anxious, depressed, and they're chugging a bottle of red wine.
that.
People in the blue zones are hanging out with their friends all day, every day in front of a beach, very relaxed, drinking a glass of wine, right? That's very different.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Very valid point. Um, it'd be interesting. I'm just giving you random information out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Like this is not a thing we do. It'd be interesting to see one day if you guys got like almost like levels or whatever, NutriSense where you have like some health coaches attached to you to help people who do like lab to consumer um lifestyle shifts. You know what I mean? Just like basics and making
Yeah.
helping like an evaluation. That was just thought. I'm like that would be interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we definitely thought about it and how we can kind of, expand that way because we know our healthcare providers are doing that. So we're actually hiring a molecular geneticist. And they're going to start doing a lot of kind of these like report reviews and interpretations and kind of, yeah, we're going to, she's awesome who we're hiring. I'm really excited because she has a bioinformatics and statistical background too. So we'll be able to tie back those trends to what we actually see.
I was gonna say there's like it sounds like there's like so much room for growth in what you guys are offering and doing.
Yeah.
More and more comes out, like the niches and different things that you could be offering. It sounds really cool. So,
Yeah.
is there anything that I haven't mentioned that's really worth everyone knowing about? Obviously, it just sounds like a thing people should jump.
Um, Yeah, definitely. If you're curious or just wanting to learn at all, get a baseline. Like I said, people regret kind of, after they implement all these changes, not even testing earlier. So if you're even interested, you can get that cheaper kit. Just get your, toes in the water and see what it's all about. I guarantee you'll probably want to test after with that more comprehensive one. But again, like you said, Katie, I think just keeping up with the research. It's so new. So, it is probably going to be a little frustrating when we keep releasing more and more insights, but it's only going to drive the cost down, the insights up, and kind of inform you on what you can do about your own health.
Yeah, that's great. And if you guys ever do the test and you're doing it more lab to consumer, you can absolutely just find, easily a functional practitioner on ifm.org and use their find a practitioner link. And, if you're not happy with the response and the of the lab age, you could absolutely do very achievable things in hopefully a fairly short period of time if you're dedicated and really want to make that happen for yourself. So that's really great. I'm excited to learn more. And I think if you're listening and if you've had a baby or you're pregnant, please don't do it immediately. Wait till it's not going to show your biological or your a poor age versus your chronological age because you'll be sad. That's my other lab for further insight, guys. No, this is really great. I'm excited to link and have everyone be able to access the lab and really, even if practitioners, we actually teach quite a lot of coaches and practitioners things. So even just exposing them to this lab if they're unfamiliar that it's even
Yeah,
available for their clients is really exciting. So
yeah,
I,
absolutely. Yeah, no, this has been great. But if anyone has any questions, they're more than happy to reach out. TruDiagnostic.com and have my podcast, Everything Epigenetics, as well. So super excited and yeah, really love this conversation, Katie.
thank you so much, Hannah, for being here and for TruDiagnostics existing.